Good Sunday morning, everybody. Team Trump takes shape. Hi, everyone. Thanks for being with us. This is Sunday Morning Futures. President-elect Donald Trump meeting with ExxonMobil CEO Rex Tillerson this weekend. Reports suggesting that the businessman has become the leading candidate for Secretary of State. So when will Mr. Trump make up his mind? We will talk next with Kellyanne Conway coming up in a moment. Plus, what's the Trump team's response to the CIA finding the Russians may have interfered with the U.S. election? Then tax reform, scaling back regulations, repealing Obamacare, all top priorities for the new administration and the new government come January. I'll talk with two key congressional leaders, House Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy with me this morning, along with House GOP Whip Steve Scalise, on what they can accomplish come the new year as we look ahead right now on Sunday Morning Futures. President-elect Donald Trump expected to name his new Secretary of State in the coming days. And ExxonMobil CEO Rex Tillerson, reportedly the leading candidate for the job. Mr. Trump praised Tillerson as a, quote, world-class player in an exclusive interview with Fox News Sunday anchor Chris Wallace.
He's much more than a business executive. I mean, he's a world-class player. He's in charge of, I guess, the largest company in the world. He's in charge of an oil company that's pretty much double the size of his next nearest competitor. It's been a company that's been unbelievably managed. And to me, a great advantage is he knows many of the players, and he knows them well. He does massive deals in Russia. He does massive deals for the company, not for himself, for the company.
Let's bring in Kellyanne Conway right now, senior advisor to President-elect Donald Trump. Kellyanne, good to see you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Hi, Maria. It's my pleasure.
So where did Rex Tillerson's name come up? Can you take us behind the curtain a bit and talk to us about how Donald Trump decided to make him one of the leading candidates for Secretary of State?
It's become quite obvious, Maria, that President-elect Donald Trump has allowed a wide berth of possibilities for the Secretary of State position. And that's what leaders do. They take the counsel of many people. They look across the spectrum of possibilities. And I think in the case of Mr. Tillerson, you see someone who is not a typical politician or even a diplomat. You see a successful businessman, not unlike Donald Trump, who is accustomed to negotiating, who is accustomed to managing many employees across many countries. I mean, Exxon is a $370 billion company that is actively involved in 50 countries. This man, Mr. Tillerson, has been active at Exxon since about 41 years. His entire career, he gets high marks from employees, high marks from those he's dealt with. And this is the Trump effect. You know, people who try to put Donald Trump in the conventional box are immediately and sorely disappointed. You see with so many of his picks already, Maria, and so many ways that he ran his own campaign, that this is a man who's not going to be able to stick him into conventional boxes. And I think the idea that he is entertaining Rex Tillerson among another field of possible candidates for Secretary of State, Maria, the fourth highest ranking official in our nation's government, really is part of the Trump effect.
Well, let me ask you this, because I found it incredibly strategically savvy. I agree with you in terms of the 50 countries that they're doing business in. But the pushback, Kellyanne, from the skeptics is that he's got too good of a relationship with Vladimir Putin. Do you find that perhaps the rapport and deals that he's done with Russia could end up being a negative here, or would that actually be helpful?
These are skills, not liabilities. When you think about how he negotiates and he deals with foreign leaders to get them to work with his American company, not against it. And, of course, he's an oil man. He goes where the oil is. That's why you've seen him in places like Russia, China, Yemen, the developing world, certainly the Middle East, Maria. And, you know, those critics and naysayers, I think, are partly the election deniers and partly folks who just were not anticipating such an unconventional possibility. And let me just note, of course, as you recognize, this is not a final selection. It is up to President-elect Trump and him alone to make that selection and make that announcement, which he says could be maybe the middle of next week or so.
Okay, so we will hear then in pretty short order who his pick is. Talk to us about how the cabinet is taking shape right now. When do you expect that he will have the full cabinet in place?
In the coming weeks. I mean, we are at a breakneck pace. This is President-elect Trump and Vice President-elect Pence really just engaging from day one on this flurry of activity, meeting with about 85 men and women from very diverse backgrounds and perspectives, not all of whom, obviously, Maria, will serve in the administration in some formal capacity, but each and every one of whom loves this country and has amazing advice and counsel and experiences and vision to add to the mix. In addition to the 85 or so men and women they've interviewed and spoken with, you're up to about 50, 52 world leaders that they've either talked to or that they have met personally. We feel very comfortable with our timeline, putting together an incredible cabinet that even some of the skeptics have lauded as incredibly skilled and accomplished and focused on what's good for this nation. We're way ahead of schedule of both Republican and Democratic presidents of past. And again, I think it's very symptomatic of what President Donald Trump will do. He's a guy who's going to accomplish many great things, keep many of his promises, and execute and deliver, because that's what businessmen, non-politicians do. He's going to do that in the first couple weeks, first few months of his administration.
What are the priorities in terms of the president-elect's choosing some of these? I mean, you know, the left is pushing back, saying, look, he's got a guy who used to sue the EPA, the Oklahoma Attorney General, as the guy running the EPA. He's got a business guy, Andy Posner, who is against raising the minimum wage to come in and represent labor. So what are the priorities in terms of how he's picking these roles?
Well, first and foremost, Marie, it has to be a man or a woman who's completely qualified and capable of doing the job immediately. And relatedly, second, it's somebody who understands the Trump vision, the Trump doctrine for that particular cabinet position, and will go ahead and execute that, certainly in cooperation with President Trump, who you know is going to be a very hands-on president. Amidst this criticism, let's just take it one at a time. In terms of Scott Pruitt, a very successful attorney general in Oklahoma, very well respected, the idea that he is going to go to the EPA and start to roll back these suffocating regulations that have prevented this nation from developing and leveraging the considerable energy sources that are off our shores and indeed under our feet should be great news to those who want us to be more energy independent, who like the idea that we can create billions of dollars in revenues for this nation, and certainly many, many jobs.
Yeah.
When you think about the Environmental Protection Agency, it's obviously everybody's for clean air and clean water. That won't change. That's a given. But at the same time, we have just been completely hamstrung to go ahead and invest in coal and shale and these other energy sources, and that's been because of partisanship, and that's been because of these regulations. In the matter of Mr. Posner, here's somebody who knows what the Donald Trump vision for the Department of Labor is, and he has vowed to execute on that.
Yeah.
He's a guy who has said that he understands the value of employer-employer relationships. He certainly has, my goodness, he has employed tens of thousands of people over a number of years. So he understands that these captains of industry and these people from all different corners of the country with vast experiences and backgrounds are really adding to the richness of a cabinet that will share one common denominator, and that's understanding that President Trump's ideas for each of these specific agencies will dominate.
Kellyanne, let me ask you to look ahead for us. You've got a big week coming up. The president-elect has said that he's going to do a press conference on Thursday to talk about the separation of his business interests and how he will be all about America and separate his business interests. And then on Wednesday, he's invited a number of technology CEOs and technology executives to meet with him. What is he trying to accomplish? In terms of the press conference on Thursday, this could be a big blind spot. He's got to get this right.
Well, that's what leaders do, though, Maria. They have press conferences. They put it all out there. They're transparent about the process they're undergoing. Look, we're in unprecedented times because not only is Donald Trump unconventional as a non-politician taking the oath of office for President of the United States, but he's also someone who's unique in that he's just a successful businessman. The man is brilliant and accomplished. He's a self-made billionaire who's employed tens of thousands of people, has vast assets and holdings across the globe in many different countries, on many different continents, but yet he's very committed to making the sacrifice of complying with the protocols and the laws as they are explained to him and making sure that there's a proper disassociation, as the law may require, of him from his business interests. We all know that his 3 adult children, Tiffany, of course, is studying law, but his other 3 adult children have been respected and effective executives in his corporation for many years. And so they're expected to continue in those vast roles. But I really respect the fact that President-elect Trump will go out there in public on Thursday and talk about those business associations. And then, sure, let's get tech together. We know, Maria, you know better than anyone, that tech was very heavily for Hillary Clinton. Yeah. That's where they put their money. That's where they put a lot of their algorithms, if you will, social media platforms. I think it's fantastic that the President-elect is bringing in many people who disagreed with him and who do not support him, because, as he said on election night, he will be the president for all Americans, and that includes these vast industries that are very important to our economy, very important employers, and I think future movers and shakers in our economy and in our culture. It's a fantastic idea. I'm glad they're coming.
Yeah, it's really extraordinary. We're going to be previewing it, of course, on the Fox Business Network. Kellyanne, good to see you. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Maria.
We'll be right back. Now, the GOP House leadership and more of our top story. President-elect Donald Trump's leading candidate for Secretary of State, ExxonMobil CEO Rex Tillerson, a man Mr. Trump describes as, quote, a world-class player because of his deep relationships with a long list of global leaders. But if Mr. Tillerson does get the job, his ties to Russia, specifically Russian President Vladimir Putin, could create some hurdles during the confirmation process. Democrats are pushing back. Joining me right now is the House Majority Leader, Kevin McCarthy. Congressman, good to see you.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Big news with Rex Tillerson. We're waiting on the confirmation, of course, but what do you think about this pick?
I think it's a smart pick. I think all these that he's going through picking this cabinet, he's been deliberate, he's been thoughtful, he's taking all the information in, but he's also taken this election about a change, about changing the direction of this government. And I think this is a smart pick when you look at it. If this comes to fruition, Rex has been an individual that's run the largest company, had to make really tough negotiations. He knows world leaders about where he's played. So I think it's very smart.
I imagine he's had to get permitting to drill in some rough places, right? So he's had to deal with not just Putin in Russia, but Yemen and Saudi Arabia, across the Middle East, in terms of getting the permitting that he needs to do business.
Not just the permitting, but when you talk about the investment, when you talk about the return, he also has an understanding, I think even greater in negotiations, about what these world leaders are looking for, the problems within their own country. So he knows whether infrastructure is strong or not. He knows what revenues they're looking for. He knows what buttons kind of push them. I think he has an interesting background. And remember, when you put him in, you also have the rest of the State Department, other experts in there to assist. So I think this is a smart outside look that adds a little more to what we've had in the past.
It's really fascinating, the cabinet that he's putting together. How would you characterize the overall cabinet so far? A lot of business people, a lot of generals. What's your take?
Well, I like the generals that he selected. Those are individuals who get jobs done no matter whatever the job is. I like the idea. It is an approach that you know there's a change in government, but also he's holding people accountable. You've got to get an outcome to what he wants to see happen.
Let me ask you about the legislative priorities from your standpoint. I'm glad you're with us 2 blocks today, because we're going to go through some of your priorities, and you've talked about it being tax reform. You've spoken about Obamacare. Go through the rules that you think are too onerous. We had Wilbur Ross on my morning show a couple of weeks ago, and he basically said, incoming Commerce Secretary, in the last 2 years, President Obama has instituted 7,000 new rules. Just in the last 2 years, he said, he joked about it. He said, do you think the U.S. was that wild and woolly 2 years ago that we needed 7,000 new rules put in place? So what rules go away?
Well, it's one of the greatest things of the problems. As we're trying to come out of a recession, the Obama administration had just put all these new regulations on us, kind of just pushed the economy down, pushed investment out. Because if you look at the latest numbers, investment in business was down. Productivity was down for 3 straight quarters. Why? Because the new people that were being hired were hired to carry out new regulations instead of more output. Now, when we look at what we can do, the Obama administration in just the first 6 years, proposed more than 500 major rulings. And this is really important because you do not become a major ruling unless it gets scored that it's going to cost $100 million to business.
Wow.
And so just the atmosphere of what's going on. After this election, you've seen the stock market go to new heights. I think that's all based upon, is government going to impose more regulations on us or be common sense? Yeah. So first of all, you have 3 co-equal branches. The executive had become too strong. We're not co-equal today. We've got a tie in the Supreme Court. We're going to fill the Supreme Court. We've got Article 1 of the Constitution when it comes to the House and the Senate and the rules that we have. So you'll see in the first days, we will pass something called the REINS Act, which simply says no major ruling, a new regulation that costs more than $100 million, can be imposed without a passage of the House and Senate. Why? We are the voice of the people. They hold us accountable every 2 years. They should have a say in this process. Then you also have regulations that come into effect. Then maybe somebody sues for that. They still currently today impose those even when it may not have its day in court. We'll have a sue and settle. You cannot impose a new regulation until that lawsuit is settled.
Wow.
So you have the check and balance from the judiciary as well. I think those fundamental 2 bills would set a new tone of a fairness when it comes to common sense regulation.
One of the reasons that the stock market is rallying is because they think this is going to be great for corporate earnings, and that will move the needle on economic growth. One of the analysts that I had on the show, the morning show the other day on Fox Business Network, said a drop in the corporate tax rate from 35% to 15% will equal a 20% increase in corporate earnings. Do you agree with that?
I do agree with that. And I agree, and when you look at what we're going to do in the House, our #1 focus is jobs. We need growth in America. Growth in America will solve so many problems. You won't be able to stop this deficit unless we grow and get more people working.
Right.
And that's why we're looking at tax reform. Simplify it, make it fair, lower the rate, and let more money go into the people's hands so they make the investment. Obamacare is just failing on its own. Skyrocket premiums. You have the 23 co-ops that got more than $2 billion, 16 of them have failed already. You got the insurance company pulling out of market so people don't have choice. This is going to collapse on itself. We have to look at healthcare in a new form and have a new healthcare system.
All right, let's build these topics out. We're going to take a short break. When we come back with the Majority Leader, we're going to talk about tax reform, Obamacare, and securing the borders. We'll go through priorities for 17 next. More now on some key economic issues ahead in the new Trump administration. I'm with House Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy. Congressman, you said you are going to be all about jobs. Tax reform is a priority. Repealing and replacing Obamacare is a priority, and border security is a priority. How do these things lead to jobs? Walk us through what your priorities are for 17, and when do you think you could actually get these things done? Well,
I think all these are going to have to start right away. That's why I set the calendar for Congress. We made sure within those first 100 days we're working and in session more.
That's excellent.
And we add weeks that we're working in there. We look at not just 100 days, but the first year. And we want to be working closely with this administration, this Senate as well, so we've been meeting on a weekly basis. There's certain things we can do right away and certain things we have to start and make sure we get it right. One, when it comes to border security, you've got to make sure your country is safe. So President-elect Donald Trump has run on making sure this border is secure. You'll see an early bill with that. Regulations that we can deal with early on, looking at rolling them back in others. You'll start moving those. Article 1, when I talked about the REINS Act and the this midnight rules, sue and settle. Then you'll look at Obamacare. It has failed, and everybody knows it. So what are we looking at a different place? We have to repeal it first, and then we're going to replace it with new legislation where you get greater choice, more doctor-patient relationship, a healthcare system that actually works, that the premiums go down, greater choice. Not an easy thing to do.
All those insurance companies, I mean, United, Universal, they said they were going to lose $1 billion on it. They pulled out. Do you think that you're going to be able to work in terms of the insurance companies offering health care?
Oh yeah, you want to have individuals that have greater choice. more options out there to pick from. And I've already sent a letter to every governor and every insurance commissioner. Give us your ideas as well. So it's not just the House or Senate involved in this. We want everybody's input in this because we want to get this right.
Explain sanctuary cities to me, because I don't understand why or how it's possible that for all of these years we've been blowing off the law. I mean, what are you going to do with mayors like Rahm Emanuel who say, look, if you're illegal, you're safe in Chicago?
No. America is strong because of the rule of law. And if you break the rule of law, you break down society. 2 years ago, we passed a bill. If you want to ignore and only pick and choose which law you want to enforce, then you should not be recipients of federal money. I think the sanctuary city issue is going to go away. These mayors are going to realize they can't pick and choose what federal law they want to enforce or not. So we need to protect the citizens there. Why would they want these individuals to come there illegally, not knowing who they are, and protect them? Their first role should protect America.
So how far are you willing to go in terms of voting, in terms of holding back federal funding for these cities?
Well, we have shown 2 years ago that if you want to pick and choose the law, and it's not just in sanctuary cities, we have to be a country that has a rule of law, a fairness. You can't pick and choose which ones they are. So you've got to uphold the laws that are passed. You've got a balance within to go through it. If you don't want that, then you shouldn't want the federal money to come with it.
Wow.
I think that's simple.
There will be a lot of debates in the new year. I can see that. Let's talk tax reform. Let me go back to that for a moment. We had Stephen Mnuchin on the show recently, incoming Treasury Secretary. Here's what he said about priorities in 17.
Our number one priority is going to be tax reform. We think that by lowering the corporate tax rate, we're going to make U.S. corporations incredibly competitive and create enormous amounts of money that comes back onshore and creates jobs.
Trump's plan is a 15% corporate tax rate. The GOP House plan was 20%. Where do you see this going?
Well, we'll sit together and we'll work. The only way I see it going is that it's going to get lowered. If we want to create more jobs in America, we've got to create a structure that makes us competitive. Right now, we're not. Right now, our corporate tax rate is so high, it gives you an incentive to be in another country. We also, if we're in a world economy, you create money in another country, we punish you if you want to bring that back to invest in America. We're going to change all that. Keep America competitive where we can compete around the country. Create a tax system that's fair. Create a tax system that's simple. We have a tax plan that fits on a postcard, so every family can fill it out themselves.
But should we be pushing and warning companies that if you go overseas and then try to get your products back in, you'll get a 35% tariff?
No, I think the way we solve competitiveness, we create a structure that makes you want to be in America. And I think lowering the tax rate, dealing with repatriation so the money can come back to America, invest in America for American jobs, solves the problem that we're trying to go out after.
You're not expecting to be warning the way President-elect Trump has done?
I think what President-elect Trump is doing, he's warning others that America is not competitive today and that we're going to change all that. We're going to work very closely together to make sure we get a tax code that's fair and that works.
And real quick on infrastructure, Congressman, are you going to be pushing back? Are you going to spend $1 trillion on infrastructure? As a conservative?
$1 trillion is very expensive. You know, I came into Congress, watched the President Obama do this stimulus, and at the end of the day, more people believed Elvis was still alive than the stimulus created a job. But what you can do, currently today, the regulations to build a road, you wait a decade for that. You could see the reforms there. And what I like about President-elect Trump doing, he brings that business idea in. What about a private partnership? What about taking investments from the outside, changing the structure so you can build it faster, and looking at infrastructure in a different manner to make sure we build America stronger where we can be competitive?
That's what I was going to say. As a conservative, you can't like $1 trillion in spending. You're saying you could probably get there without spending that much money.
Oh, no. You can make reforms where you can build something easier, faster, and cheaper. And you can take a reform where you allow private sector money in to make it happen as well.
Congressman, you've got your work set out for you. We're wishing you the best.
Well, I'm telling you, we will not miss this window of opportunity. The America put a trust in us. They want to see change, and we're going to make sure it happens.
Congressman Kevin McCarthy joining us. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Great to talk with you. So we'll be right back. Welcome back. Many GOP leaders praising President-elect Trump for his transition process so far. But new polls this morning show that American voters have mixed opinions about his high-level appointments and cabinet choices. Mr. Trump filling 11 out of 16 cabinet posts so far. The Secretary of State role still open. We obviously have been talking about Rex Tillerson this morning, as are the heads of the Energy and Veterans Affairs Departments. Frank Luntz is with me now. He's a GOP pollster. He joins us right now to assess. Good to see you, Frank.
It's a pleasure. Your
reaction first to what we've heard this morning. We heard from, obviously, Kevin McCarthy on his priorities. Your take.
It's the priorities of the House and the Senate. I see a greater level of cooperation and compromise between Republicans in the House and Republicans in the Senate to get it done. And mark my words, this 100 days will be the most significant on Capitol Hill since 1995. They're going to move quickly. It's not just about repeal of health care. It is an entirely different look at the legislative branch of politics. They're going to take responsibility. They're going to talk a lot about accountability. And they're going to say to the executive branch and the bureaucracy, you can't regulate and litigate and tax the way you have. It's time to roll them back. I think it's going to be an incredible 100 days.
It is incredible. I mean, look, Stephen Mnuchin talking about getting tax reform done in the first 100 or 150 days or so, and Kevin McCarthy seemed right on board with that.
And the key is whether they're going to work together. And the fact is, no one knows this. I mean, this is really inside baseball, is that the House positions and the Senate positions have been different over time. What I'm seeing is a coming together, a listening, a genuine listening and hearing from the American people saying, work it out, compromise on the details, stick to the principles, and get it done. And Kevin McCarthy, more than any person I know, has the ability to bring people together, even some Democrats, to pass this legislation in a bipartisan fashion.
Well, look,
and watch that, by the way. You're going to see, and I know this, I've been talking up on the Senate, you're going to see half a dozen Senate Democrats wanting to work with this administration and a couple dozen House Democrats wanting to do the same as well.
Look what he ended our interview saying, basically, we're not going to waste this opportunity. We see what the American people have asked us to do. We're not going to let this window of opportunity leave us. All right, we've got to get to these polls.
But it's not asking. The public is demanding.
Yeah.
I mean, this is what I hear every day.
Right.
You don't have a chance to fail. You better succeed, or they will punish you.
So mixed performances in terms of these polls. On the one hand, Donald Trump's favorability rating is up to 50%.
Right.
What's going on with the broader public? All of a sudden, they're on the Trump train. And then you've got this Pew poll basically saying more Americans are not so sure about his transition picks.
The Pew poll is in comparison to other administrations, but Donald Trump did not get here the normal way. And so comparing him to previous administrations isn't a proper comparison. What I do note is that even people who didn't vote for him are now willing to give him a chance. The Democratic Party is fractured right down the middle. Half of them still don't accept the election results, and the other half wants to move on, wants to see where they can cooperate, and then challenge him where they disagree.
Yeah. All right. So then it sounds like you see a different and a changing sentiment out there. I was speaking to someone the other day, and they're saying, well, I'm going to spend more over the holidays, for the Christmas holiday. I'm feeling a little more bullish. Is that what you're seeing out there?
People who watch my appearances have noted how pessimistic I have been, even to the point of being upset, because I don't believe that we listen to each other anymore, cooperate with each other. And what I've seen in the last month is a greater degree of, okay, let's move forward. Let's focus on the future. Let's find those commonalities and pursue them. You see it in the consumer confidence. You see it in the right direction numbers. You see it in Trump's approval and favorability. For the first time in the last 6 years, the public is becoming optimistic again that the changes that they talked about during the election are the changes that are going to happen.
Yeah, we've seen it in the stock market. We're talking about Dow 20,000 and money moving into stocks. Frank, it is good to see you. Thank you so much.
And everyone have a great holiday season, and let's hope that this positivity continues.
Yeah, and right back at you. Frank Luntz joining us. Let's take a look at Media Buzz, what's coming up top of the hour. Howie Kurtz joins us. Howie, good morning to you.
Good morning, Maria. Newt Gingrich has some strong words on how President Trump can avoid dealing pretty much with the White House press corps. Dan Abrams will be here to talk about the scourge of fake news, and we'll look at the CIA findings on the Russian hackers trying to help Donald Trump during the campaign and why that was leaked now to the Washington Post. All coming up on Media Buzz.
All right, we will see in about 20 minutes, Howie. Then repealing and replacing Obamacare. Can it be done come 2017? Next up, House Majority Leader, Majority Whip Steve Scalise is with me on set. Stay with us. Back in a minute.
the Second Amendment, repealing and replacing Obamacare, securing our southern border.
That was President-elect Donald Trump in Louisiana on Friday, laying out his biggest priorities for the next 4 years. Mr. Trump hitting the campaign trail for GOP Senate candidate John Kennedy, who was competing in the state's runoff election. Kennedy winning the race over his Democratic opponent last night, shifting the balance of power in the Senate to 52 to 48. Joining me right now is Congressman Steve Scalise, the House Majority Whip, and it is great to have you on the program, Congressman.
Great to be back with you, Maria.
Your reaction to Louisiana, your home state.
Huge win. I mean, to over 20-point spread in the Senate race, and then we won big in the contested congressional seat. And, of course, Donald Trump came down Friday and actually campaigned for both of those candidates. So really big surge at the last minute that helped us push both of them over the top.
That is really just terrific. Obviously, your Energy and Commerce Committee, you're first in terms of reconciliation?
Yeah, when we get the budget resolution done in those first 2 weeks, then that's going to set up the opportunity to do reconciliation, to go gut Obamacare, defund Planned Parenthood, and that will start in the Energy and Commerce Committee, and we're really excited about that.
When does that start? Give us a sense of timing.
It could start as soon as when President Trump is sworn in. So, we want to move quickly. We want to have this all ready for him when he comes into office, and this is something he wants to do. So finally, you've got this intersection where the House and the Senate are going to be working with the president to get this economy moving, to solve a lot of these big problems that's holding our country back.
And the reason I mentioned the Energy and Commerce Committee is obviously you've spoken with Rex Tillerson. He's testified to your committee, right?
He sure has, yeah. And, done a great job, obviously leading one of the largest companies in the world, a very respected world leader already in terms of a business leader, but he's gone before committees, had to take tough questions and really done well.
Tell me your plans on Obamacare. We understand that first it has to be repealed. But then the questions are, how do you replace it? Walk us through the process of what you're envisioning.
If you go to what we did last year, we actually put a bill on Barack Obama's desk to completely gut the law. And what that does is sets up the opportunity to then go and replace it with reforms that put patients back in charge. The first thing you have to do is you have to get unelected bureaucrats out of these decisions, IRS agents, over at HHS, all of the mandates that are jacking up costs. I mean, just a few months ago, right before the election, families were getting 25 and higher % increases in their premiums. We're already hearing that in March. Come March, in just a few months, families are going to be getting those big increases again for the following year. It's unworkable. It's destroying the doctor-patient relationship and jacking up costs. It's got to change.
Well, we know that next year you're going to see double-digit increases across the country in several states. State like Arizona is going to see the premiums up 116%. So what kind of a plan reverses that? I mean, what do you need? You just eliminate those middlemen? How do you do it to get those costs down?
A lot of the parts of Obamacare that are destroying the entire industry are, number one, the mandates that say you have to buy something, not that you and your family want, but that the government says you need. That turns it all upside down. And so all of a sudden you're paying for things that you don't want. It's costing a lot more. And now because these mandates don't work, you don't even have options. In many states, you're seeing a growing number of states going to only one choice. So you as a family, if you're not able to get health care through your employer, you only have one choice to buy health care. You wonder why the costs are going up. First thing you've got to do is get rid of those mandates that aren't working and that are jacking up the costs so that you can make those choices, Maria. Why shouldn't you be able to buy a plan that's good for your family, that you choose, not an unelected bureaucrat in Washington? And if you find, by the way, if you find a good plan in another state instead of your own state, you ought to be able to buy that plan. Let you be the one to make the choice between you and your doctor. We need to make sure that people with pre-existing conditions can't be discriminated against. I think that's a universally agreed upon concept. But then let's actually open up the marketplace. Let people buy across state lines for health insurance like they buy every other product. There are a lot of really good things you can do, strengthening health savings accounts. One of the great success stories of health care before Obamacare was health savings accounts. Obamacare got rid of that. Again, imagine that. Something that's really working, Obamacare got rid of it. Let's go and put those things back in place using common sense principles.
You've got a Republican sweep. You've got the liberty and the wherewithal to really get things done in these next 2 years. People are going to be watching to say, okay, you're at the wheel. Good luck.
That's the exciting
you feel the
part
pressure?
of this. Well, look, I mean, if you got 2 minutes left and you're down by 5 points, I want the person in that wants the ball, not the person that's afraid of getting the ball. We're excited about this. We've been pushing for this for years, since Barack Obama came in and literally started putting all of these policies, laws, regulations in place that are destroying the economy. We said, give us this opportunity, and the American people did. We're excited about it, and we're ready to go and get this country back on track.
Congressman, we are excited about what we're hearing. Good to see you.
It's a great time, Maria.
Thank you so much for joining us, Congressman Steve Scalise there. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Panel time. Republican senators on the Armed Services Committee now joining Democrats to call for an examination of the CIA report that Russian hackers tried to affect the outcome of the 2016 election, saying, quote, it should alarm every American. President-elect Trump calling the CIA finding ridiculous. Let's bring in our panel right now. Ed Rollins is former Reagan-Bush 84 campaign manager. Richard Fowler is Democratic strategist, radio talk show host, and Fox News contributor. And Caitlin Huey Burns, national political reporter for RealClearPolitics.com. Good to see you all. Thanks so much for joining us.
Maria.
Do you believe this about the CIA report?
I don't know, being perfectly honest. I think it needs to be investigated. I think at the end of the day, Trump won the election and it's over, and he won it by going out and taking his case to the American public. But I think for the future, we need to make sure that the Russians aren't basically into our political parties or in our government or anything, the rest of it.
Well, Kellyanne Conway joined us at the top of the show, Richard, and she would say this is just the non-believers, the people pushing back on the Trump election already. It's over.
The Central Intelligence Agency is not what I would call non-believers. They're very, very smart people that do amazing work, and I agree with Ed 100% on this. Trump has won this election. There's no equivocations. I think the Clinton campaign will tell you the same thing. What I think we need to make sure is we need to safeguard our elections in the future from any type of foreign entanglement in our voting machines, in our voter registration process, or in the hacking of any party's emails, whether it's the Democratic Party, the Republican Party, the Green Party. And because I believe in democracy, even the Nazi Party in this country's email should not be hacked by a foreign entity.
Yeah, but Caitlin, I mean, throughout the whole election, this obsession with Russia on the left. I mean, everything was Russia's fault, and everything was, oh, Russia's hacking. Then we never actually got any evidence that that was the case.
Well, I think the point about investigating this, I mean, remember Marco Rubio over the course of the primary when this, over the course of the election when this came out, talked about the importance of investigating this kind of thing, and with the WikiLeaks and all of that. I think Ed should have written the statement that Trump delivered the other night, saying, what Ed said, I think, is more reflective of what's actually going on. Instead, Trump, going against CIA directly right at this critical time in the transition, I think, raises some eyebrows.
Let's talk about Rex Tillerson for a minute, because that's all the speculation this morning. Donald Trump just tweeted out a few minutes ago. Here's what he tweeted. Whether I choose him or not for state, Rex Tillerson, the chairman and CEO of ExxonMobil, is a world-class player and a deal maker. Stay tuned. What do you make of it?
As he ran around the country being the populist candidate, this would have been the last man he'd ever talked about being in his cabinet. But I think he could be a superb choice. I think if they basically put someone with him that understands the State Department, like John Bolton as the deputy secretary. My worry is selling Exxon around the world is an easier task than selling the American philosophy around the world. And you need someone who understands the State Department, makes the State Department basically bend to your will. So I would argue that would be a very strong combination.
That's a really good point, because on the one hand, he knows where the bodies are buried, right? He's done deals with the most hostile of the hostile across the world. On the other hand, you really need that inside knowledge of state,
and regardless,
John Bolton
regardless of what we said, we have to keep our eye on Putin. Putin is our long-term adversary. He's not our friend.
Right.
I tend to agree with Ed on this. This is the first Ed. But no, I think you cannot have somebody with a learning curve at the State Department, especially given our geopolitical climate. As I was saying during the break, Maria, I just left, I did some touring in Africa, and what you see there is this dominance by China. If Trump's ideal is we are going to take on China and we're going to grab the bull by the horns, we've got to make sure we're keeping and funding policies like PEPFAR, which allows us to have some influence in the African continent, knowing that China has complete and total dominance. So we've got to have somebody who understands how to string a needle very carefully, and having somebody with a learning curve who understands how to sell corporations but not how to sell a foreign state is problematic.
Yeah, you're just back from Africa, and China is really dominating because they want the resources. But who has the jobs? Are Africans in the jobs, or are Chinese taking the jobs?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think you have a lot of expats from China there running these corporations, running these hotels. And what makes it so problematic is that the only leverage we have is because we're not making the FDI that we need to be making there in Africa is what we do with PEPFAR, which is our bill that has allowed us to sort of decrease the HIV/AIDS transmission rate, really work on increasing the health of Africa, and we have to continue that.
Caitlin, in terms of Rex Tillerson, we don't know. I mean, Trump just came out with that tweet now, whether I nominate or not. Is he trying to put some questions out there now that everyone's speculating that it's him?
Well, he's certainly run this whole Secretary of State pick very publicly, talking on Twitter about some of the people coming into these interviews. I think the question with Rex Tillerson, too, is whether he can get confirmed by Republicans. I mean, Lindsey Graham, John McCain, others have voiced concerns about this, particularly in light of the Russian hacking news from the CIA. So I think that's really going to play into this. And I do think, I've talked to national security experts, too, who say that the deputy is a really important role here, but also John Bolton will face some scrutiny as well from some Republicans like Rand Paul, who came out today and
Great
said no.
point. What about the confirmations, Ed?
There's going to be some knockdown, drag-out confirmation fights. I mean, the one thing, this has been an extraordinary cabinet. I think, I particularly like the generals. I think they will do a very effective job. But some real fights are ahead. And when you have a 52-seat margin, or 52-member, you can't lose very many. You couldn't lose McCain. You couldn't lose any of these people. And the Sessions thing is going to be open. If he gets confirmed, it can take a little bit of time before the new senator gets in there. So I think what we have done is we have put in an all-star cast, but we've clearly polarized the left. The left are going to basically be revved up to these fights.
Wow.
I think there's a question, too, about how much Donald Trump will fight for some of these nominees. I mean, he's been clear about the Secretary of State choice being someone who shares his worldview. Does he go to bat for Rex Tillerson and leaves the
He can't lose a fight. He has to win every fight.
But I don't think he's going to win every fight. I mean, I think he's going to have some problems with Betsy DeVos or a Rex Tillerson.
Thank you so much. Have a great Sunday.